Intro music begins, mysterious and slightly magical, then fades to a gentle background hum. Have you ever felt like you didn't quite belong? Like you were caught between two worlds, searching for a place to call home? Imagine waking up in a land of dragons, a place of fire and stone where every day is a lesson in survival and forgotten magic. This is the story of Nari, a girl who did just that, 7 years. For Nari, 7 years had passed like whispers on the wind since she stumbled through the veil separating the human world from the realm of the Dracons. The scared little girl was gone, replaced by a 15-year-old with eyes that held the secrets of both worlds. Her home was a crystal cave, high in the Whispering Mountains, a secret sanctuary provided by her guardian, the ancient and wise Dracon, Lysander. Life here was a series of lessons unlike any other. Today's challenge? Lighting a ceremonial brazier with her mind. "Focus, little one!" Lysander's deep voice rumbled, his massive tail curled around the chamber. Nari gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead. "I'm trying," she muttered, her frustration growing. "But I'm not a Dracon. My thoughts don't just become fire." Lysander let out a chuckle that echoed off the crystal walls. "All minds carry fire, Nari. Humans have simply forgotten how to kindle it." Nari's existence was a fragile compromise. The Dracon Council allowed her to live, but only under strict conditions. She must stay hidden, learn their ways, and never, ever try to return to her own world. Sometimes the memories of her village, her grandmother, felt like a dream from another life, a ghost she could barely grasp. Her days were filled with Draken history and the art of elemental communion, learning to speak with stone, water, air, and flame. While she couldn't command the elements like a Dracon, she learned to listen, to hear their ancient songs. "Try again," Lysander encouraged, his voice gentle. "But this time don't command the fire. Ask it." Nari closed her eyes. She remembered his teaching. The elements are not tools, they are companions. She quieted her mind, pushing aside her frustration, and instead extended a silent, gentle invitation to the coals. A stir, a flicker. Then, a tiny, determined flame danced to life in the brazier. "I did it!" she gasped, the sudden excitement breaking her concentration and snuffing out the flame. Lysander nodded, his ancient eyes crinkling with approval. "Progress. Tomorrow, we will try again." But not all Dracons were as patient as Lysander. Valus, a battle-scarred Dracon with scales like obsidian, was a constant, looming threat. He had lost his mate in the wars with humans and saw Nari as an insult to his entire kind. "Teaching our sacred ways to a human is blasphemy," he'd growl during his unwelcome visits, his voice dripping with contempt. "Have you forgotten what her kind did to our nestlings?" Lysander remained calm, a mountain against Valus's storm. "I haven't forgotten," he would reply, his voice a low rumble. "But neither have I forgotten that it was our own pride that ignited those wars." During these tense confrontations, Nari usually made herself scarce, disappearing into the hidden passages of their cave home. But today, she lingered, hidden in the shadows, listening. "The child sees through the veil, Valus," Lysander continued. "She hears the stone songs. These are signs." "Signs of deception," Valus spat back. "Humans are clever mimics, nothing more." The weight of Valus's hatred and her own uncertain place in this world pressed down on Nari. Later that evening, she found comfort in their nightly ritual, polishing Lysander's immense scales. It was their quiet time, a space for the questions that truly mattered. Finally, she gathered the courage to ask what had haunted her for years. "Why did you save me, Lysander? Why risk the anger of your kind for a human girl?" The ancient Dracon was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Long ago, Before the wars, Dracons and humans were allies. We shared knowledge, dreams, even families. He paused, a deep sadness in his tone. I had a human companion then, a scholar named Elian. He understood more about the crystal harmonies than many Dracons. He died trying to prevent the First War. Lysander turned his head, and his ancient amber eyes met hers. When you asked to see where you were before dying, in that moment of despair, I heard his wisdom in your words. That night, Nari's dreams were vivid. She dreamed she was flying, soaring over landscapes she'd never seen, feeling the rush of wind beneath wings she didn't possess. Nari laughed, the sound bright in the crisp mountain air. We humans only have one form. It's you Dracons who are the strange ones. An unlikely friendship began to blossom. Kalis would often join her, teaching her how to navigate the strange, floating crystalline islands that dotted the sky, and how to sense the approach of the dangerous flux storms that swept through the realm. He showed her a side of the Dracon world that was vibrant and young, not just ancient and solemn. On one of their expeditions, their curiosity got the better of them. They ventured farther than Nari was allowed, drawn by a strange energy to an ancient temple carved directly into the mountainside. The air inside was still and heavy with age. The walls were covered in faded paintings, incredible murals depicting Dracons and humans standing side by side, working together beneath twin suns. "What is this place?" Nari whispered, her fingers gently tracing the image of a human scholar and a great golden Dracon. "The Temple of Convergence," Kalis answered, his voice hushed and reluctant. "From before the Sundering, we're not supposed to be here." But Nari felt an irresistible pull, a humming resonance that seemed to come from the very stones of the temple. It was calling to her. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone altar, and upon it, a cracked crystal sphere that pulsed with a faint inner light. As her fingers brushed against its cool, smooth surface, her world exploded. Visions flooded her mind, memories that were not her own. She saw a time of harmony, of shared knowledge, of trust and respect between two species. She saw Dracons and humans building cities together, sharing magic and science. The 19th summer of Nari's life in the realm of ether arrived with changes she had never anticipated. It had been 3 years since her connection with the Heartstone, and that single event had awakened abilities that continued to puzzle even her guardian, Lysander. She could now feel the emotional currents of the Dracons around her, a subtle thrum in the air that told her their joys and fears. She could sense the very pulse of the realm's energy flows, like rivers of unseen power. And sometimes, in fleeting, disorienting flashes, she would glimpse fragments of possible futures. "Your transformation progresses faster than I ever expected," Lysander observed one morning. Nari was sitting cross-legged on the stone floor of their mountain home, a small, brilliant flame dancing just above her open palm. It was a feat no ordinary human should ever be capable of. With a simple thought, she willed the flame away, and it vanished without a sound. "Am I still human, then?" she asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between them, an answer just out of reach. Lately, Lysander had been taking on his humanoid form more and more frequently. In this shape, he was a tall, elegant figure, his skin the color of warm copper flecked with gold, and his amber eyes still held all the ancient wisdom of his true Dracon self. He claimed it was to better instruct her in the finer, more delicate aspects of Dracon lore, things that required a subtler touch than a massive claw. But Nari sensed there was more to it, a reason he kept hidden. He shifted his weight, avoiding her gaze. "The council has requested your presence," he said, the change of subject abrupt. "They wish to evaluate your progress." Nari's breath caught in her throat. This was completely unprecedented. The council had reluctantly permitted her to live in their realm, but in all these years they had never shown the slightest interest in meeting her. "Why now?" she asked, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "After all this time?" "Rumors spread," Lysander replied, his voice low and careful. "Whispers of a human who walks between worlds, who speaks with the elements. Some fear what this might mean for the prophecies." The journey to Vathazar, the Drakon capital, took 3 full days. For much of it, Lysander carried Nari on his massive scaled back, soaring high above the ether realm. From that vantage point, the world revealed its full, breathtaking splendor. Floating archipelagos were connected by bridges made of pure, shimmering light. Inverted forests hung from masses of hovering earth, their trees growing downward towards the abyss. And then in the distance, they saw it. The great crystal spires of Vathazar, so immense they seemed to pierce the sky, refracting the sunlight into a constant cascade of rainbows. As they drew closer to the city, Nari's heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it. Her first real exposure to the wider Drakon society. Beyond Lysander, the kind-hearted Kalis, and the few other reclusive Drakons who occasionally visited their remote mountain home. The council chamber was a sight to behold, a vast amphitheater carved directly from a single living crystal. Positioned on 7 raised daces were the ancient Drakons of the council. Their scales were a dazzling array of colors, from the brilliant platinum of the one at the center to the deepest, star-flecked indigo. Their eyes, ancient and unblinking, held the weight of millennia. The chamber was packed with other Drakons, their murmurs echoing in the crystalline space, all of them there to witness this unprecedented event. "Step forward, human child," commanded Erythea, the platinum Drakon whose voice resonated with absolute authority. Nari walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last, acutely aware of the countless eyes fixed upon her. "For 12 seasons, we have permitted your presence in our realm," Erythea continued, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Lysander vouched for you with his honor. Now we must determine if that trust was warranted." What followed was an intense, grueling examination. They tested her on everything Lysander had taught her: the long, complex history of the Drakons, the art of elemental communion, and even the sacred songs, melodies and words typically taught only to pure-blooded Drakon offspring. Through it all, Nari felt Lysander's steady presence behind her, a silent, unshakable pillar of support. Then came the question she hadn't prepared for. "Show us your connection to the Heartstone," demanded a sharp voice. Nari's eyes darted to the speaker, and she was stunned to see Violus, a Drakon known for his skepticism, sitting on the council. Nari glanced back at Lysander, her eyes wide with uncertainty. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Taking a deep, centering breath, Nari closed her eyes. She reached inward, searching for that familiar, warm link that had become a part of her 3 years ago. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. A soft, ethereal glow began to emanate from her chest, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the great crystals that formed the very foundation of Vathazar. "Impossible," someone whispered from the crowd. "The prophecy," murmured another. Erythea silenced them all with a single powerful sweep of her long tail. "Nari, of 2 realms," she declared, her voice ringing with newfound gravity. "You present us with a dilemma. Your abilities suggest the convergence approaches, a time when our worlds may once again intertwine. Some of us welcome this, others fear it." "I mean no harm to your people," Nari said, her voice clear and firm, finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Everything I've learned from Lysander has taught me to respect the balance, to honor the sacred space between our worlds. And yet," Valus interjected, his voice dripping with suspicion. Humans destroyed that balance before. What prevents history from repeating itself? Before Nari could even formulate a response, a familiar figure stepped forward from the crowd. It was Kalis. "I have witnessed her communion with the elements," he announced, his voice steady and true. "She treats them with more respect than many young Drakons I have known." The debate raged on, stretching late into the night. Factions began to form among the assembled Drakons, some arguing for her, others against. Finally, Erithia raised her massive wings, calling for silence. "We will deliberate further on this matter. Until then, Nari remains under Lysander's guardianship. But—" Her ancient gaze shifted, pinning Lysander where he stood. "She must be prepared for all possibilities, including a return to her own realm if the Council deems it necessary." The journey back to their mountain home was quiet, heavy with unspoken words. That night, Nari found sleep impossible. She wandered to the mouth of their cave and found Lysander there, already in his humanoid form, gazing up at the twin moons that bathed the landscape in a soft, silver light. "Would they really send me back?" she asked, her voice small as she settled beside him. "They fear what they don't understand," he replied softly, not looking away from the sky. "And you, Nari, have become something that neither human nor Drakon can fully comprehend." In the pale moonlight, she saw him differently. She noticed the subtle lines of weariness around his eyes, the immense weight he carried. Though Drakons lived for millennia in this vulnerable humanoid form, his age and his burdens seemed more visible. "I don't want to leave," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "This realm, this is my home now." His amber eyes finally turned to meet hers, and in that shared gaze, something profound shifted between them. The familiar bond of guardian and ward, of teacher and student, was transforming into something new, something deeper. His hand, warm and still faintly scaled, even in its human shape, rose to gently touch her cheek. "I believe you are that bridge, Nari. But bridges must be anchored to both shores. They can never fully belong to just one." As the twin moons climbed higher, casting their silver light across the silent peaks of ether, Lysander and Nari remained side by side, their shoulders touching. Their futures, once so clear, were now entwined in ways neither could foresee. The bond that had started with a lost child and a compassionate guardian had finally awakened into something else entirely, a connection that defied the ancient divisions between their kinds, and perhaps a love that could change the fate of two worlds. Thank you so much for joining me on this chapter of Nari and Lysander's story. If you enjoyed it and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I'll see you in the next one. The storm still raged on the second day, but inside the cave, a quiet healing had begun. I found myself kneeling beside Thorn's massive injured wing, my small hands moving with a precision passed down through generations. I'd laid out all my remedies on a flat stone, jars of salves, bundles of dried herbs, and vials of tinctures. The earthy medicinal scents filled the air, a strange but not unpleasant counterpoint to the dragon's own smoky aroma. "This is going to sting," I warned him, my fingers dipping into a thick green paste. I spread it carefully over a tear in the leathery membrane of his wing. "It's a nettle extract. It helps tissue regenerate, but it burns before it heals." Thorn let out a snort, and a plume of smoke curled up towards the cave ceiling. "I breathe fire, little healer," he rumbled, his voice deep and ancient. "Your herbs can't hurt me." But I saw it. The moment the salve touched the rawest part of his injury, the great dragon flinched. A low, deep vibration ran through his entire body. I didn't say anything, just kept working with quiet focus. The silence stretched for a moment, before he spoke again. His voice a mix of genuine curiosity and a clear attempt to distract himself from the stinging in his wing. "How did you come by such knowledge of dragon anatomy?" he asked. My hands never stopped their gentle work. "My grandmother was the healer before me," I explained. "She taught me that all living creatures share certain similarities. The principles are the same, whether you're treating a sparrow's wing or a dragon's." I finally looked up, meeting his intense golden gaze. "Though, I have to admit you're my first dragon." "And likely your last," Thorn remarked, his tone dry as dust. A small smile played on my lips. "Perhaps. Or maybe this is just the beginning of a whole new chapter in my healing practice." For the next several hours, as the rain continued its assault on the mountainside, I worked methodically. I cleaned his old wounds, applied different remedies, and occasionally had to ask him to shift his enormous body so I could reach a difficult spot. To my surprise, he complied with a kind of gentle docility, his golden eyes watching every single move I made. "You mentioned Willowvale," he said after a while, his voice softer now. "I know of this place. Your people leave offerings at the base of the mountain every solstice." I nodded, feeling a flicker of pride. "It's a tradition of respect. Unlike other villages, we remember that these mountains belonged to dragons first. Yet humans continue to encroach," Thorn said, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. "When I was young, no human settlement stood within 50 leagues of these peaks." "The world changes," I said simply, not defensively. "But it doesn't always change for the worse." I paused in my work, wiping my hands on a cloth I kept at my side. "In Willowvale, children grow up hearing stories of dragons as guardians of knowledge and keepers of balance, not as monsters to be slain." Thorn's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Pretty tales to placate a dangerous neighbor." "Is that what you think?" I challenged, surprising even myself with my boldness. "That we leave offerings out of fear instead of respect? That we tell these stories to deceive rather than to preserve a truth?" Before he could answer, I reached into my pack and pulled out a small object wrapped in silk. I unfolded the fabric carefully, revealing a small carved dragon figurine. It was no bigger than my palm, made from a beautiful copper-colored stone. "My father carved this for me when I was a child," I explained, holding it up for him to see. Every night he would tell me stories of Thorn, the wise ember dragon who protected the mountains and everyone who respected his dominion. He told me how you once diverted a lahar flow that would have destroyed 3 villages, and how you guided lost travelers out of blizzards with the glow of your fire. Thorn just stared at the little figurine. I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, like old memories stirring in the deep. He had done those things, hadn't he? Centuries ago, before his view of humanity had been so soured by betrayal and dragon hunters. The carving was surprisingly accurate. It even had the distinctive crest of spines along his back, his slightly curved horns, the powerful build that set ember dragons apart from all the others. "Your father has seen me then," he observed, his voice a low murmur. I shook my head. "No. The carving is based solely on stories, passed down through generations. My father's grandfather's grandfather might have glimpsed you, but the description has remained consistent through all that time." Something shifted in Thorn's chest. I could feel it. It wasn't physical pain, but the deep, resonant ache of recognition. These humans, the ones he'd dismissed as threats, had preserved his image, his deeds, his legacy. As evening drew in, I finished bandaging his wing with long strips of cloth soaked in a sweet-smelling solution. "This needs to stay on until tomorrow," I instructed, my voice professional but gentle. "The herbs will work better if they're kept moist and protected." Thorn flexed his wing, slowly and cautiously. A look of surprise crossed his ancient face. The sharp pain had dulled to a manageable ache. "Your skills are adequate," he admitted, though the word seemed to catch in his throat. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound echoed through the vast cavern, bright and so unexpected. High praise from the Ember Lord. I shall treasure it always. That night I curled up near the comforting warmth of his massive body and fell asleep. But Thorn, he stayed awake. He told me later that he just watched the steady rise and fall of my breathing. He couldn't remember the last time any living creature had slept so peacefully in his presence, trusting him completely not to harm them. The feeling was completely foreign to him, this quiet companionship, this total absence of fear. For the first time in decades, Thorn didn't spend the night counting his regrets or mourning the slow diminishment of his power. Instead, he found himself wondering what other stories the people of Willowvale told about him, and whether any of them held even a single grain of truth about the dragon he had once been. Thanks so much for listening to this part of the story. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. See you in the next video. 2 weeks after Alara's arrival, the mountain trembled. A deep, ominous vibration shook the cave, sending loose stones skittering across the floor. Thorn, who had been showing Alara his collection of ancient scrolls, suddenly went rigid, his spines bristling. "What is it?" Alara asked, her voice laced with alarm. Thorn growled, a low rumble in his massive chest as he moved toward the cave entrance. "Dragons! Many of them! Coming this way!" Alara followed, shielding her eyes against the bright sun. At first, she saw only clear blue sky. Then dark shapes appeared on the horizon, winged silhouettes moving with deliberate purpose toward them. "I count 17, Thorn said grimly. "Shadow drakes from the western volcanoes." "Are they friends?" Alara asked, though the tension in Thorn's body already gave her the answer. "No," he replied. "They serve my nephew, Kale, the Ashen Prince, a dragon with ambitions far beyond his worth." He turned to Alara, his golden eyes intense. "You must hide. The inner chamber behind my sleeping quarters. Go there and do not emerge until I call for you." But Alara stood her ground. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone. Your wing isn't fully healed." "This is not a discussion, little healer," Thorn rumbled. "Kale would see a human in my lair as proof of weakness, evidence that I've become nothing more than a pet keeper." Before she could protest further, the air filled with the sound of powerful wings. A large dragon, his scales the color of charcoal with veins of purple running through them, landed on the cliff edge. Though smaller than Thorn, he carried himself with an aggressive confidence, his amber eyes gleaming. "Uncle," the newcomer called, his voice dripping with false respect. "How gracious of you to greet us. I feared we might find you too feeble to rise from your deathbed." Thorn moved forward, deliberately blocking Kale's view of Alara. "Nephew, you bring quite an entourage for a family visit. Did you fear the journey or merely your aging uncle?" Kale's eyes narrowed. "I bring witnesses, uncle, to a historic transition. Word has reached even the western peaks that the great Ember King's flame diminishes. The dragon realm requires strong leadership. And you believe yourself qualified?" Thorn's voice remained calm, but Alara could see the raw power coiled in his shoulders. "I know I am," Kale replied smoothly. "The Shadow Drake clans have pledged their allegiance. All that remains is for you to recognize the inevitable and step aside. Or be removed." A low growl rumbled in Thorn's chest. "You were always ambitious, Kale, but never patient. A true king knows when to strike and when to wait." "I've waited long enough," Kale snarled, dropping all pretense. "Look at yourself, Thorn, wounded, isolated, harboring a human pet." He gestured dismissively in Ilara's direction. "Yes, I can smell her. How the mighty have fallen." Ignoring Thorn's warning glare, Alara stepped forward. "Lord Thorn has shown me more honor and wisdom in 2 weeks than you've displayed in 2 minutes, Ashen Prince." A ripple of surprise ran through the watching shadow drakes. Kale's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing into venomous slits. It speaks! How amusing! Tell me, human, do you know the fate of creatures who stand between dragons and power? I know the difference between power and strength, Ilara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. One is taken, the other is earned. Kale laughed, a harsh sound like grinding rocks. Your pet is entertaining, Uncle. Perhaps I'll keep her when this is over. He turned his full attention back to Thorn. I challenge you for the Ember Crown by ancient right and combat. Unless you prefer to surrender and save yourself the humiliation, the Shadow Drakes murmured. A formal challenge hadn't been issued in centuries. By dragon law, Thorn could not refuse without forfeiting his title. I accept your challenge, Thorn declared, his voice echoing across the mountainside. 3 days hence, at high sun, in the obsidian arena. Kale's expression flickered with surprise. He had clearly expected Thorn to back down. 3 days? Why the delay? Fear, perhaps? Tradition, Thorn corrected him. The challenge must be witnessed by representatives from all dragon clans, not merely your shadow drake sycophants. Or have you forgotten our laws in your rush for power? The younger dragon struggled to maintain his composure. 3 days, then. Prepare yourself, Uncle. Your reign ends when the sun reaches its zenith. With a powerful leap, Kyle took to the air, his followers scrambling to join him. As they disappeared, Ilara turned to Thorn, concern etched on her face. What happens in this challenge? Combat to submission or death, Thorn replied grimly. But your wing is healing well thanks to you, he finished. But not well enough. Kale is younger, faster, and has been plotting this for decades. He would not issue a challenge unless he was certain of victory. Ilara paced the cave entrance, her mind racing. Then we have 3 days to ensure he doesn't win. Thorn regarded her with curiosity. We? Yes, we, she insisted. You've spent 70 years in isolation while Kale has been building alliances. You need help, and you have a human who knows a bit about healing, strategy, and surprising arrogant young dragons. Against all odds, a deep rumble of laughter emerged from Thorn's chest. And what does a village healer know of dragon combat? Ilara's eyes sparkled with determination. Nothing yet. But I'm a quick study, and you're going to teach me everything, starting with why they call you the Ember King. For the next 3 days, the cave became a flurry of activity. Thorn instructed Ilara in the ancient traditions of dragon combat, while she prepared specialized herbal concoctions to strengthen his weakened body. They even sent messages to other dragon clans using ancient fire signal methods Thorn hadn't touched in decades. On the eve of the challenge, Thorn found Ilara sitting at the cave entrance, staring at the stars. You should rest, he said, his voice softer than usual as he settled beside her. Tomorrow will test us both. I was thinking about when we first met, she replied softly. How certain you were that death was coming for you. It still may, Thorn acknowledged. Kale is no ordinary opponent. Ilara turned to face him, moonlight illuminating her determined features. But you're no ordinary dragon. She placed her hand on his foreleg, a now familiar gesture of trust. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already proven him wrong. Your flame hasn't diminished. It was just waiting for the right moment to blaze again. Something shifted in Thorn's ancient eyes. He lowered his great head and gently pressed his muzzle against her shoulder, the closest a dragon could come to an embrace. If I fall tomorrow, he rumbled, leave the mountains. Kale will not honor your courage as I have. If you fall tomorrow, Ilara replied with fierce certainty, it will only be after giving Kale a battle that will be remembered for generations. She leaned against his scaled face, a gesture of intimate trust. But you won't fall. We still have too many scrolls to organize and too many stories to share. Under the vast canopy of stars, the dragon and the human remained side by side, drawing strength from a bond neither had sought, but both now treasured beyond measure. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. If you enjoyed the story of Elara and Thorn, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures. Let me know in the comments what you think will happen in the Obsidian Arena. Until next time, stay curious. The rain fell in sheets, a gray curtain across the mountainside. 8-year-old Nari, soaked and shivering, huddled beneath a jutting rock, trying to escape the storm's fury. She hadn't meant to wander so far from her village. It was the lights that had lured her away, strange shimmers dancing in the air like daytime fireflies. She'd chased them, her small legs pumping, until the familiar woods had melted away. Now, her soaked clothes clung to her like a second skin as thunder cracked overhead, a giant whip splitting the sky. "Hello?" she called out, her voice a tiny, trembling thing against the roar of the storm. The forest around her felt wrong. The trees were twisted, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers, taller and more ancient than any she'd ever seen near her home. The shimmering lights she'd been chasing were gone, and a profound, chilling loneliness settled over her. What Nari couldn't possibly know was that she had stumbled through a thinning veil between worlds. She had crossed an ancient boundary, a magical border weakened by the storm's raw power. For centuries, these barriers had been meticulously maintained by the Drakons. They were a necessary separation, a silent truce after the devastating Sundering Wars had nearly annihilated both their kind and humankind. As dusk bled into true night, an unnatural silence fell upon the forest. There were no crickets chirping their evening song, no owls hooting from the high branches. The air itself seemed to hum with a strange, latent energy, a current that made the fine hairs on Nari's arms stand on end. She curled into a tighter ball, squeezing her eyes shut, trying desperately to recall the protection charms her grandmother had taught her, the old words a faint whisper in her terrified mind. "Child of dust, why do you trespass here?" The voice didn't come through her ears. It resonated deep within her thoughts, ancient and powerful. Nari's eyes flew open. Peering from between the colossal trees were two enormous, glowing amber eyes. As the creature stepped forward, moonlight glinted off its form, revealing scales that shimmered like polished copper. This was no dragon from her village storybooks, with their clumsy, brutish shapes. This being was elegant, ancient, a magnificent draken. Its body was serpentine, adorned with magnificent feathered wings, and crystalline spikes grew like a crown along its spine. I'm lost," Nari whispered, her throat tight with a fear so profound she couldn't even think to run. "I didn't mean to trespass." The draken lowered its massive head, its nostrils flaring as it studied her, its scent a mix of ozone and ancient earth. "No human has crossed our borders in 300 years, its mind voice rumbled. "How did you manage it, little deceiver?" "I followed the lights," she answered, the simple truth all she had to offer. "They were dancing in the rain." Her honest reply seemed to give the great creature pause. "Rain lights," it mused, a flicker of something unreadable in its ancient gaze. "They are gateway markers. They should not be visible to human eyes." Just then, a rustling in the undergrowth announced the arrival of more drakons. These were smaller, their scales the color of midnight blue and deep emerald. They surrounded her, hissing and murmuring in a strange language of whistles and rumbles, their eyes glowing in the gloom. "Burn it," one of them suggested, its thoughts sharp and cruel in Nari's mind. "Send it back," another countered, its voice filled with cold logic. "The treaty demands its death," insisted a third, its conviction chilling Nari to the bone. The copper drakon remained silent, its amber eyes fixed on her. Nari would later learn his name was Lysander. He watched her, a small, shivering human child, and seemed to weigh the words of his kin against something else, something deeper. When he finally spoke, his voice was a command that silenced all the others. "This child sees the rain lights. Such sight has meaning among the old teachings. Nari, trembling from both the biting cold and the paralyzing fear, did something brave. She looked directly into the enormous creature's eyes, meeting his ancient gaze. "If you're going to hurt me," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "can I first know where I am? My grandmother says we should always know where we are when we die, so our spirits can find their way home." The raw simplicity and unexpected wisdom in her question seemed to stir something long dormant in Lysander's ancient heart. Perhaps it was a memory of a forgotten time, a time before the wars, when humans and dracons shared knowledge instead of bloodshed. "You are in ether, child," Lysander's voice softened in her mind. "The realm beyond your world's veil." Against the rising protests of his brethren, Lysander made a decision, a choice that would ripple through time and alter the course of both their worlds. He didn't sentence her to death or cast her back through the veil. Instead, he unfurled one of his massive feathered wings and gently enfolded her, shielding her from the rain and the judgmental glares of the other dracons. The leathery warmth was a shocking comfort. "I invoke the right of Crenshaw," he announced, his voice ringing with an authority that none dared to challenge. He used a term from their oldest, most sacred laws. "This child is under my protection until the council determines her fate." As Lysander carried her through the alien landscape, Nari's fear began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of wonder. They flew through forests where the fungi glowed with a soft, bioluminescent light, painting the night in hues of blue and green. They soared across vast valleys where entire islands floated serenely in the air like colossal earth-bound clouds. She had stumbled into a world she couldn't have even conceived of in her wildest dreams. A world where her very presence was forbidden, a crime punishable by death. And yet, held safe in the wing of an ancient, powerful creature, she felt a strange sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Perhaps her arrival wasn't an accident at all. Perhaps it was destiny. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into ether, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of Nari's incredible story. See you in the next video.